They're talking and they're laughing. Let's continue at coffee time. I'm going to share a biographical sketch of Eleanor Elizabeth Gordon, the woman who wrote the sermon that's going to be given today, going to be read today. And I think it's so interesting that the sermon written in 1900 is applicable today. And hearing her biographical sketch, for me, made it all that more amazing. Eleanor Elizabeth Gordon was born in 1852 on a farm in Hamilton, Illinois. Her family embraced a religious eclecticism and encouraged her from an early age to engage in freewheeling testing of various ideas and beliefs. Her intellectual independence and sturdy self-confidence meant that she could reject traditional religious points of view. Eleanor's mother was an invalid. While her father served in the Union Army, Eleanor had many household responsibilities, including care for her 5 younger siblings. She recalled that her life was divided into 2 parts, the hard living part and the great intellectual curiosity part. After studying a year at the University of Iowa, Eleanor went to work as a teacher and then as an assistant principal in Centerville, Iowa. Isolated from friends and families, she read the novels of George Eliot, comparing her situation with that of Dorothea in Middlemarch, who, quote, had to marry in order to find a mission. Eleanor realized that she never felt a compulsion to marry, and, quote, I had 2 hands and a brain, all my own. No one should dictate as to what they should do. Eleanor's best friend from childhood, Mary Safford, wanted to be a minister. In mid-1870s, when both were in their early 20s, these 2 young women in 1870 pledged to one another that they would spend their lives together serving the world as a team. In 1879, with the encouragement of the ministers from nearby Keokuk, Iowa, Eleanor and Mary organized a Unitarian church in Hamilton. The success of this church attracted notice of Jenkins Lloyd Jones, secretary of the Western Unitarian Conference. The following year, he offered Mary Safford a new Unity Church in Humboldt. Before the new building was finished, the members of the congregation had ordained Mary and called her as a minister. Eleanor arranged to become a principal there at another school. Thus, she and Safford were able to continue working in tandem for the future. Eleanor gave her first sermon as a member of a lay preaching committee assigned to fill the pulpit when Mary Safford was elsewhere. All this time, Eleanor later wrote, there had been growing in my own mind a great disconnect. While I loved to teach, I felt the need of a lesson to teach greater than those found in a school textbook. It had become her ambition to win a larger place in a larger school, a church. When Safford was called to Sioux City in 1885, Eleanor went with her as parish assistant and housekeeper on the condition that she would be allowed time for study every day. But as the church prospered, demands on her time increased correspondingly. When Mary Safford took a sabbatical in 1888 to 89, Eleanor was able to attend a winter term of classes at Cornell University. In May of 1889, Eleanor was ordained in Sioux City. Though her friend and mentor, Jenkins Lloyd Jones, formally welcomed her into the ministry, she wondered how many other male Unitarian ministers would second his welcome. She later wrote, I could not forget with what bold horror many of those same Unitarian ministers looked at a woman who aspires to this sacred office. As members of a network of Unitarian women ministers known as the Iowa Sisterhood, Eleanor recruited young women to enter the ministry and helped to provide a special sense of collegiality for those who did. She took an interest in young women who wished to advance themselves through education, often helping financially as well as with encouragement. She preached that a woman must rid herself in notion that she is a peculiar creature, and as such she must have peculiar treatment. She must know that there is no feminine road to excellence, no women's way to success. She must believe herself a human mind with only the limitations of a human mind, in part a universal mind with all the possibilities of growth and development. After ordination, still working with Mary Safford, Eleanor was often treated like the parish assistant. And so, in 1896, she accepted a call to be on her own in Iowa City. The 4 years that Eleanor spent in Iowa City were difficult. She referred to her pastorate as solitary confinement. The Unitarian church there was in decline, and local Unitarians, anxious to assimilate with other Christians, resisted her radical message. Feeling unable to make any positive change, she fulfilled her duties, but otherwise marked time until she could decently resign. Eleanor later and more profitably served churches in Burlington, Iowa, and Fargo, North Dakota. From 1907 to 1910, she was also field secretary of the State Unitarian Conference of Iowa. Her last pastorate was in Orlando, Florida, where a group of former Sioux City parishioners invited her to start their church. Eleanor found her political voice and used it well and long. Early in her career, she had advised women to wait for evolutionary social progress to bring them political equality. But in 1904, in Just Like a Woman, she argued that domestic confinement increased flighty and hysterical women. Women who participated in a greater world would be better equipped to teach their children citizenship and clear thinking. In 1907, president of the Iowa Equal Suffrage Association, she became more militant. She led groups of women who removed physical obstacles to ballot boxes, started a campaign to pressure political candidates, and introduced parades and other confrontational tactics. Old age and near blindness did not end Eleanor's political and religious activity. In 1937, long after women had won the vote, she wrote a letter to American Unitarian Association President Frederick Elliott. In it, she observed and deplored a new anti-feminist tendency, even among Unitarians, who appeal for ministers made it very plain that no woman need apply. Since the World War, she wrote, there has been a distinct trend in both the professional and industrial worlds against women's place in both. Positions of trust, authority, and leadership are being taken from her and given to men. Eleanor died in Keokuk, Iowa on January of 1942, and her body is buried in Hamilton, Illinois.
Anne, would you turn on the cooler? Good morning. My name is Jan Lee. I'm a member of the worship committee here at First Unitarian in Albuquerque. We are the group assigned to fill the pulpit when our ministers are away. It's a time-honored tradition. The Reverend Eleanor Gordon began her preaching career that way. Bringing you someone else's sermon is, quite frankly, an experiment. The way to spread the good news from one church to another and one town to another is to make the sermon text available. Sermons used to be published in books, and now we find them on the internet. Today, the members of the worship committee bring you a classic sermon we believe still makes a relevant argument. In her 90 years, Reverend Gordon provided an example of spiritual and intellectual curiosity and resolve that would benefit any of us here today. This is what she said. Without criticizing the work of other organizations and with no suggestions as to what may be or may not be their work, It seems to me our duty is plain. Our work is mapped out for us. Our ideal is clear before us: to make truth, goodness, and beauty the supreme things in the world by the slow process of education, by the slow process of teaching line upon line, precept upon precept, by training the children, by inspiring young men and women, by making religion the one real thing in the world, by making the religious life the all-inclusive life. Shall I make this still more concrete? Shall I speak still more plainly? I recently visited a village for Sunday services. As I went from the train station, I was compelled to make my way through cigarette-smoking, tobacco-spitting, and a crowd of uncouth men and boys on the platform. There was evidence of thrift in the village on every hand, but everything was hopelessly, drearily dull and homely. I was in the place 2 days, and the following is the substance of many conversations held with different residents. "Why don't you have a village improvement society?" I asked, "and cut these weeds and plant trees and improve the yards and do things to make the place more attractive?" There is no one interested in taking the lead. "How many ministers in the town?" I asked. 4. "Why can't they do it?" "Oh, they wouldn't. That isn't religious work." "Is there a humane society?" "No." "Don't you need one?" "Yes, very much." "Why don't the churches unite for this work?" I asked. "Oh, they wouldn't think that was religious work." "Have you a literary club, a debating club, or a library, or anything to make life beautiful or interesting to the boys and girls?" As I said this, I thought with a shudder of the boys I had seen at the train platform. "No," came the reply, "there is no one to take the lead in such things." "What do your ministers do?" "They preach sermon and lead the prayer meetings." "What do they preach about?" "Doctrines." "The Methodist is mighty good at showing that the Baptists and Presbyterians are wrong, and the others do about the same." "And what do they do at prayer meetings?" "Why, pray, of course." 4 church buildings, each one homelier than the others. 4 ministers, 4 Sunday schools, 4 prayer meetings. And the emphasis in one and all on certain little, narrow interpretations of certain texts from the Bible. Nothing from one week's end to another that made for life in the highest, broadest sense of the word. Everything that makes life beautiful, rich, pure, and humane was left out. Art and literature, a dead letter. Poetry, an unknown tongue. Kindness and mercy only dimly hinted. Grace and refinement of speech or bearing, utterly neglected. This village, more or less, is your problem and mine. As much as we are concerned with the slums of the city and the homeless and abandoned, these ordinary folk also deserve our consideration. These people had plenty to eat and lived in comfortable homes. The tyranny of debts and the evil of unjust discrimination did not affect their lives much. But don't you think they hungered and thirsted for that which makes life worthwhile? The men and women of a place like this are waiting for a liberal minister to unite with them. They are waiting for such a leader to make life there beautiful, good, and true, to make life pure, refined, humane, to reveal the inspiration of art, the marvel of music, the glory of literature, to lift men and women into the atmosphere of a rational religion and noble ethics. Such a minister is doing the noblest work that can be given to a child of God to do. It may be a religious act for a much-loved musician to renounce forever the artist's life and dedicate her voice to the cause of the poor. But the religious impulse that would confine the trained singer's voice to singing of only gospel hymns at revival meetings is not to be trusted. The great masters of music and poetry also have their message for the sorrowful of the earth. To sing some simple religious music, and by the singing to move men and women to be better and to do better, is religious work. But the artist who sings the compositions of great masters to an audience of cultivated people may be doing a far more beautiful thing. In the one audience, as in the other, there may be aching hearts needing comfort, stolid souls that need to be awakened, deeper feelings that need to be stirred. It depends upon the motive with which one sings, whether it is religious work or not. The voice may sing, "Oh, to be nothing, nothing," at a revival meeting, while the heart is filled with arrogance and self-conceit. To win for ourselves and to win for others, insofar as one soul can win for another, the life that is true, good, and beautiful, this is our ideal. From where does our inspiration come? In all the truth that the past has won, in Bibles, books of science and history, we will search for the Word of God. What we find claiming to be this Word, we will test by our own experience and hold on to that which seems true. All the good of the past, the devotion of the humble as well as the exalted, the earnestness of the ignorant as well as that of the learned, all that made for noble living and brave daring is for our heritage. All that is fair of form or face, the music of childhood and of birds and of artists, the color of sunset sky and painted canvas, the revelation of poem and tale. From one and all, we draw our inspiration until our hearts give glad recognition that all truth, when fully realized, is beautiful. All beauty, when fully realized, is good. And all goodness, when fully recognized, is both truthful and beautiful. All truth is beautiful, all beauty is good, and all goodness is truthful and beautiful. Does this sound like a hard task? Would some of us choose the easier way? Do we still question our strength and wisdom? A great artist once stood before a masterpiece by the great genius of his age, someone he could never hope to equal or even rival. And yet the beautiful creation before him only elevated his feeling, for he saw realized there those conceptions which had floated before him, dim and unsubstantial. In every line and touch, he felt a spirit immeasurably superior to his own and yet kindred to himself. As he looked upon the great picture before him, he exclaimed with dignified humility, "And I too am a painter." Isn't this our spirit as we stand before the great responsibilities of our work? We pass in review the history of humanity. We trace, step by step, the steady gain of the true, the good, the beautiful. Our minds thrill in response to the brave deeds of the past. Our hearts beat with exultation as we learn more of the devotion of patriot, of the heroism of reformer and martyr, of the earnestness of saint, prophet, and poet. As we read of what they did, we know we cannot win what they succeeded in winning. And yet, in the presence of their success and proud achievement, in dignified humility, we recognize our kinship, and each can say, I too am a human soul. I too am a child of God. I too am an heir of all that has been won. I stand in the long line of succession and claim as my own all that I am worthy to have to hold. This is the end of Eleanor Gordon's sermon. I wanted to add a few thoughts of my own. To win for ourselves and to win for others the life that is true, good, and beautiful, this is our ideal. That's what she said. I'm pretty sure we do that. Not just the winning for ourselves. This congregation, the members and friends of First Unitarian all around the state, work to help others get to a better life. One example I think of is the after-school tutoring program here in Albuquerque. We work with the children from our neighborhood, helping them catch up and keep up in school. And we give them music and art programs that they may not get in school. Another example is the Adult ESL program. Did you know we have an English as a second language program here? We serve a couple dozen folks each semester who have come to Albuquerque from all over the world. We have a food bank here, and we support the child care program that shares our campus, La Puerta de los Niños. All of that is great. What we do is wonderful. And while I'm not one to rest on my laurels, I think we could take a moment to reflect on all we give to the larger community. Give yourselves a mental pat on the back. And then we'll talk about what more we can do. Eleanor Gordon believed the responsibility of religion extended beyond traditional boundaries and into all aspects of community life. People want and need to be uplifted and encouraged. That means we have to support the schools. It means we have to support music and art, as well as pushing for math and science education. It means we have to support the public libraries, which, by the way, can be a gateway to great learning as well as a source of entertainment. Eleanor Gordon called on the clergy to do this. I say all of us bear the responsibility to lead the way to a life that is pure, refined, humane, to reveal the inspiration of art, the marvel of music, the glory of literature, to lift men and women into the atmosphere of a rational religion and noble ethics. The people who do this are doing the work the universe calls us humans to do. May it be so. The closing hymn is number 76, For Flowers That Bloom About Our Feet.